And now we're excited to hear from the Congressman. Congressman Gomez, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. Yeah. So I don't know if you want to just offer some thoughts first, and then we'll take some questions from the audience and just kind of chat about it. But we're really upset about how skewed this is. Congressman, tell us your thoughts.
Yeah, and you should be upset, and everybody should be upset about just how skewed it is. I've been in Congress now for 3 years, and after a year and a half, I got onto the Ways and Means Committee, which is the main taxation committee, after we took back the majority, the Democrats took back the majority. And Ways and Means is the main taxation committee, right? And here's the thing, a lot of people think, oh, taxes aren't sexy. Taxes are, we don't want to pay taxes. But if you design a system that benefits the wealthiest individuals and the wealthiest corporations, you can compound the problems that we face, especially that economic disparity that we've seen. The Republican tax plan, which I voted against, the same day that the Republicans passed it, the president signed it into law, there was a Republican lawmaker who ended up buying a yacht that same exact day, right? That just tells you that they knew what they were getting. This guy is wealthy, right? So this was just a shame. And then just recently, we learned that Donald Trump, right, just paid $750 in taxes in 2017 and 2018, and then he paid zero taxes the prior 10 years. And that just blows people's minds, because we all, the working class pay taxes all the time. I remember when my first time I filed taxes, I think I even paid $100 and something in taxes because I was a dependent on my mom's and my dad's returns, right? So I actually had to pay a little bit in taxes. And I was just working, I think, at Subway and Target or at a grocery store. And that's kind of what we have. We have a situation where you have teachers and firefighters and students paying more in taxes than the president of the United States, who is a so-called millionaire, right? So that is a system that is really rigged for the billionaire class, when teachers, secretaries, and custodians are broke and still have to pay. So we got to do more for them. We got to create a just economy. And the way we do that is by really focusing on the tax code. How do we unrig the system? How do we create disincentives that allow people to pay their fair share, especially the wealthy? The working class already paid their fair share. That's why Senator Bernie Sanders and I introduced the 99.8% Act, which is legislation to create a progressive step forward on the estate tax, which they lowered in order to avoid, let's face it, trust fund kids from paying taxes, right? So we want to make sure that we take a step to unrig the system, but we need everybody to get involved, to understand it, understand that there are people that are not paying their fair share, and it's not because they're smarter than us, not because we're suckers, right? As some people think that we're suckers because we pay taxes. It's because they have the wealth to hire CPAs and lawyers and attorneys in order to take advantage of how the law is written. But here's the thing: if the law was written that way, then you can unwrite that law, right? You can change it, but we need basically the public to be involved every step of the way. And here's the thing: people are going to ask, why raise the estate tax now? Why now? When we're in a recession, we're in a situation that we need to get our economy going. But the Republicans always make the argument: why raise taxes when the economy is going well, when you're going to mess it up, and why raise taxes when the economy is not going well? They always use the same argument for different situations. But now is the time, right? We need to raise revenue so that we can focus on the people that have been laid off, the low-wage workers in restaurants, hair salons, retail stores, grocery stores, and really put them back to work. And the disparity that we've seen in the tax code, you see it in our healthcare system, you see it in our educational system, you see it that it hits Black and brown and indigenous people and immigrants harder, right? So there's a lot of work to be done. One of the things we want to do is also make sure that the audits are done just as vigorously for wealthy individuals as they are for people who are getting the earned income tax credit, right? There are actually more people that have been audited because of the earned income tax credit than really wealthy people. I know the proportions are not the same, but still, that's not right. So we got to make sure that we're fighting for the people who are on the lower end of the economic ladder, make sure that we can fight for them and create a system that raises the resources we need to have a just and fair economy, and country. So I do appreciate all of you when it comes to this. And here's the thing. The reason why it's great to have Patriotic Millionaires on is that all of you know how the system works better than somebody that's never been able to take advantage of the system, because I don't have the income to do that, right? So when you do that, it helps us understand and be able to sell it to everybody else that this is not about, it shouldn't be about where you are in the economic ladder. Is if you want a country that works together and is balanced. And right now there's no balance in our system.
And we have some fabulous questions from our audience. So I'll just start running through them, and you know, whoever wants to answer, raise your hand. I'll pick if you don't. So this is one, we get this a lot. This is great. This was one of the big talking points against the group when we first started. So why don't rich people just write checks to the Treasury? There's nothing stopping you. Stephen.
That's one of the most absurd questions I've ever heard. Stuart Varney on Fox News asks this all the time. Anytime any of us come on television, he asks, well, why don't you just write a bigger check? Well, for two reasons. One, I'm not stupid. To write a bigger check would imply that I'm an idiot and I just want to write a bigger check. Two, maybe I'm guilty because I'm rich. Well, let me tell you something. I don't feel guilty that I'm rich at all. I've been a very aggressive investor all my life. I've taken a lot of risk. I've almost been bankrupt several times. So I've taken a lot of risk and I've built a lot of jobs in time. The reason that I don't write a bigger check is because it won't solve the problem. I tell people all the time, if I could write one check, all for everything I own, which is a lot of money. I'm a chump when it comes to rich people, but I'm a fairly wealthy guy. And if I wrote a check, I would write a check for everything I have if it would solve the problem, but it would not solve the problem. We're a big country. We all have to participate. We all have to work towards the same end. And that means all of us have to participate in that process of paying a fair share of taxes.
All right, so let's see. Thanks for the presentation, like what you guys are doing. However, I was wondering what you think less money in the pockets of the wealthy might mean for charitable giving, as the wealthy are giving a larger and larger portion of total donations, especially with fewer people itemizing their deductions. I might kick this one off to Chuck, who knows a lot about the charity dodge. Chuck, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to just start at the very beginning to say there's great work that happens in charity. It's great that people are generously sharing their money, but philanthropy is not a substitute for a fair tax system and adequately funded public service. And we shouldn't look to philanthropy to fix some of the big problems that Congressman Gomez and we've been talking about here. It's not going to do that. It's a drop in the bucket. And in some ways, it's a distraction. It keeps us from understanding that, you know, we're not, you know, we need to tax these vast concentrations of wealth and direct it into the important things that we have. So now there are going to be people who give to charity no matter what. There are many people who are generous. They don't care what the tax breaks are because they want to share and they want to give. We should celebrate that. But we should make sure the tax code doesn't, you know, here's one thing to consider. For every dollar that a billionaire gives to charity, and most of them don't give directly to charities, they give to their own private foundations. For every dollar given to charity by a billionaire, we, the taxpayer, chip in 74 cents in lost revenue, in lost estate tax revenue and income tax. So that's a big subsidy. And I don't think often we're getting much for that tax break. So I think that's one thing that we shouldn't, you know, taxing the very wealthy it may mean that fewer dollars go to charity, but it also will mean more money is going to go to public investments that we.
Morris.
Look, Erica, both of those questions imply that rich people just decide for themselves how much money to send in and what to do with it. And we can't run a country with everyone deciding for themselves how much money to send in. Imagine if your local country club worked that way. If you had a meeting and said, everybody just donate, put in whatever you want for your club dues, you would not have enough money. Some people wouldn't put in anything. The people in the middle would be very resentful and they would quit and join a different club. And the people at the top would think, well, this is ridiculous that we're being expected to pay for everybody else who's not donating. You can't run a country club that way. You can't run a country that way. I could easily raise, $100 million to build a new concert hall at Lincoln Center or something, but who's going to send in the money for the sewage treatment plant and the schools in poor neighborhoods and all the other things that we, the people, democratically, through our elected representatives, decide we need to spend money on to run our country?
So Sue Abrams is asking, does Biden's plan to raise taxes on the rich go far enough? Who wants to take that one? I'll take that one. No. The top income tax rate in the Biden plan is 39%. I would like to see rates of 70, 80, 90% for incomes over $10 million. So no, Biden's plan does not go far enough, but it's a step in the right direction. Stephen, you're on mute.
And I would agree. I mean, I always go back, being a child of the 50s, I came up in my teens in the 60s and the 70s. And in the 60s, let me remind everyone, we went to the moon as a country. We fought the most expensive war in the history of the United States, and we built the interstate highway system while the effective tax rate was 91%. Now, did nobody get rich in the 60s? Of course they did. People still got rich in the 60s, and they'd get rich today if the effective rate was 91%. Look, I don't want to pay taxes. I'm human. None of us like to pay taxes. But this is the greatest country in the history of mankind, in my own humble opinion. And you can't run a country without having fuel for the car, the government being the car. I am not an anti-big government guy. Back in the 80s when Reagan was kind of the god, he was like this magical person that never said anything or did anything wrong. He convinced everybody in America, or a lot of people in America, that big government was bad. Well, let me tell you, until you need big government, you can dislike big government, but when you need it, there's no other replacement for it. Your next door neighbor is not going to come bail you out. Government is not a bad thing. Rightly run, it's a good thing.
Congressman Gomez, maybe I'll throw this one to you. What can we do to ensure that wealthy people actually pay their taxes? And what's to happen if so I'm combining two questions. And what happens if we fix the tax code and rich people skip out and break all the rules anyway, which they seem to be prone to do? Congressman?
Yeah, no, thank you. One of the things that we need to do is make sure that the audit system in the IRS is implemented fairly. Right now, a good example, we did have a hearing in Ways and Means about how the IRS was investigating and auditing people who were taking their earned income tax credit less than the very wealthy, right? That can't happen. And I think what we need to do is actually look at an aggressive tax audit system for the very wealthy and companies, right? We can't, that's where our focus is. It should be on. It shouldn't be on the small fish, the small fry, in order to make up see if people are cheating. We need to look at the extremely wealthy. And I understand why the IRS often does it, right? It's easier to go up against, somebody that doesn't really have an attorney versus somebody who has a building of attorneys, right? That has the best legal minds around that they can pay for. But we got to make sure that it is being investigated. And the Ways and Means Committee has a role in that. When we're looking at Trump's taxes, it was based on the idea that we weren't looking at Trump's taxes, but we're investigating the IRS's audit function of the presidential tax returns, right? Why? Because when the same committee did that during the Nixon era, we found out he didn't pay any taxes, right? He owed about 500, I think 600,000 in taxes. So it is our job to have that oversight function, but really to pass laws. And I'm still working on some concepts of how to do that, but I think that's the direction we need to go in. We need to, and listen, nobody likes to, I understand people don't like to pay taxes, but we want to make sure that people feel like it's transparent and it's fair and that people's information is protected, but that people who owe money should be paying. Right, so that's the direction I think we need to go in, but we're kicking around ideas because we got to make sure that a person like Donald Trump pays more than $750, right? Actually, when I first saw that $750, I was like, do you mean $750,000? And it was like, somebody was like, nope, it's $750, right? So it blew a lot of us away, but there's still a lot of things we can do. But it's not going to be easy. That's why we need the public's voice and opinion. When people raise their voices about how unfair things are, then elected officials pay attention throughout the country. We have to make sure that people understand it's not just a Democratic issue, but it's also just a American issue. So we're going to be pushing that.
Erica, could I just say, I'm one of those trust fund kids who supports your efforts to try to fix the estate tax. And the legislation you introduced, the other 99.8% Act, has these provisions in it that close down some of the worst loophole abuses. I was reading a columnist in Forbes who was looking at that legislation. He's an estate planner, and he said somebody who understands how this stuff worked has put forward legislation to shut down these trusts and loopholes and games that people play, the wealthy people play around the estate tax. So I think in addition to sort of enforcement and oversight, I think, candidate Biden and others should support your excellent legislation to fix the estate tax, to lower the exemptions, but also close up a lot of those abuses and loopholes. And that's really what's needed. So
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, and a lot of people think that we're taxing income that's already been taxed, and that's just not correct. And there are loopholes that even you have to read 2 or 3 times to understand. I went to Harvard for my master's degree, so it's not like I can't read something and understand it, but it is complex, right? And you try to explain it to people, and they think that their stuff is going to get taxed. It's like, no, we're not talking about you, right? And we have to keep talking about it. And I think it is time that this legislation does pass. I'm going to try to push it next year for sure. And there is former secretaries of the Treasury who are in support of raising the estate tax, right? Because they know that the disparity that's growing is not healthy in a democratic society. And these are folks that are on the top end of the income scale as all of you, right? So they know that we got to get this under control. If not, we're going to have even more difficulties moving forward.
So I have a clarification question in the chat that I just want to respond to. Joey says the effective tax rate was not 91% in the 60s. To clarify, I might have misspoken. The marginal tax rate on the highest incomes during World War II was 94%. In the Eisenhower years, it was 91%. And so if I said effective tax rate, that's not what I meant. I meant the marginal tax rate. And again, I want to emphasize to the people on the phone, as you saw from the tax brackets, the marginal rate only applies to the money you make above that. So if your marginal rate starts at $10 million, you only pay the highest rate on the first dollar after the money underneath that. So right now our highest one is $622,000. So you pay 37% on your $622,051 is actually specifically the next first dollar you pay above that. So we would like to see the marginal rates go up substantially, as well as see substantially more tax brackets, because at the end of the day, somebody who makes $622,000 does not have particularly anything in common with somebody who makes 2 million or 3 million or 10 million or 20 million. So to clarify that for you, Joey. And then Joey also says, check the effective tax rates for taxpayers, and he says it stays around 30 or 35%. No, I'm not sure what the effective tax rate was in the 1940s, but the billionaires' effective tax rate today, I think, is around 23%, but it's below what, I mean, it's certainly below the 30 and 35% in the effective rate. So the point of our story is the same, which is when the marginal rates go down so substantially, and then you don't do anything, you blow up the estate tax and everything else, you end up with a low effective tax rate, much lower than we had been. So just to clarify that. Okay, this is a great one. Representative Gomez, my dad says he won't vote for anyone who wants to raise the estate tax because he thinks it will affect what he can give to us when he dies, but we are not in the top 1%. What should I say to him?
Tell him that it really only affects the wealthiest individuals. It is not targeted. Right now the estate tax under the bill is 3.5 million, but but it's not targeted towards people less than that. And in the end, it affects a lot less people. So I would say it's not. I wouldn't worry about it. Even my brother, who's a school teacher, when he found out I introduced this estate tax, he was like, wait a second. And I'm like, it's not going to impact you. Let me tell you, it's not going to impact you. So it's something, it's a red herring that people are trying to put out there when it comes to the estate tax.
Even most people who are in the 1% aren't affected by the estate tax. It's so few people.
Yeah, and it's only going to impact, if I remember correctly, only about 2% of all taxpayers would be affected by the bill. So it's very small.
Well, look, I have three grown children, and back before they raised it, I think it was $5.5 million per person for a total of $11 million that my wife and I could leave to our children tax-free. And now it's $22 million as a couple. And I told my children when it was $5.5 million times 2 for 11, if you can't live on $3 million that you didn't make, then I'm ashamed of you. That I'm going to leave you that much money, and that's not enough. I may take you out of the will altogether.
Right. Let me correct myself. It wasn't 2%. It's 0.2% of the country. It's even less.
And Congressman Gomez, this might be a great one for you, although anybody jump in. What about all the naysayers who will call this socialism? Tax the rich is socialism. Why do we want to punish the success and be socialist by taxing billionaires?
Well, this is just taxes is a price you pay to live in a civil society, right? And taxing the wealthy just makes sense. I've always said, it's like, what are you gonna do? Tax the poor? It doesn't make sense. The wealthy who have been able to, I would say, get wealthy off of this country, off of their ability to start businesses and the ability to even inherit money. I would say that it is more about creating a fair system. And when you have individuals who are literally paying less, right, less than a school teacher, then there's a problem. There is a problem when it's like, and it doesn't make us people who are working class dumb or lazy or just suckers. It is the folks that the rules of the game are rigged for the individual with the most money to take advantage of those rules, right? And they get away with it. We got to change that.
Great.
So wait, I got to weigh in on that because I take a walk every morning, and this socialism word that the right is throwing out there right now is like build that wall, lock her up. It's an emotional phrase that they throw out there. Look, any good government has, and I don't want to use that word, but I'm comfortable with it, or is socialistic by nature. And that what do you think building a highway system is? What do you think a military is? What do you think Medicare is? What do you think Social Security? All of those are features of an economy and a government that takes care of its people. And for them to throw that out there, look, let me tell you something. The majority of the people on this call probably use H&R Block to file their taxes with, or they do them themselves. I have had a team of people doing my taxes for 20 years because I'm trying to comply with the arcane and complex tax law that allows me to pay the least taxes that I can. Because as I said earlier, I'm not stupid. I want to pay the least taxes like anybody else. The structure is wrong, and we've got to fix the structure of the taxes in America.
And here's the thing, just to add to that, we do believe in a social compact, right? We do believe in a social safety net, the idea that everybody pays in, everybody has a safety net underneath them, but we also have to understand the idea of equity. And the idea of equity is that the people who have the least deserve the most help, right? If everybody got an equal slice of the pie, then you're going to end up, people who already have enough to eat are going to have stuff that they don't need. And then you're not going to make progress. You're only going to make things more disparate, right? The idea is to shrink the disparity that exists between a lot of the wealthiest individuals and the poorest individuals. But that doesn't mean like always it means how do we do it in a way that lifts people up from the bottom? And taxes is the perfect way to do it, right? You're investing in some of the lowest income areas. I believe that, the kids who need more help in school should get more resources. I believe that people that are on the streets need housing. I believe that people who don't have health care deserve to have access to quality health care. There's nothing wrong with that. And if they call it socialist, so be it.
So we have a couple more minutes before we have to close, and let me just hit a couple of these questions. From Sue, it seems like the rich have done a very good job of convincing people that raising taxes on business will result in the loss of jobs. They have done a good job of convincing them that, Sue. And I think what's so stupid about it, makes me so crazy, is that's not even how you calculate it. Like, as Morris mentioned in it, corporations pay taxes on profits. Profits are calculated after your expenses. If you're a mattress company and you buy a mattress for $1,000 and you have to pay your person to sell it $100, you don't start paying taxes until you made $1,101. So there is absolutely no correlation, none. Randall Stevenson should be like made fun of for the rest of his life. This man does not even understand basic, how do you calculate profit?
Lock him up. Lock him up.
Lock him up. So, I mean, that's number one. And then, is there any group working on a PR campaign to help educate the public about this? I mean, that's what we're doing. So we launched this on Wednesday, and we want to go to any Rotary Club, any group of friends, anybody. We will, if you put a group of people together, we will come present to you. So just go to Patriotic Millionaires .org and email us, or go to taxtherich.com and let us know you want us to come do a seminar for you. We'll be happy to. We have about 20 more of these scheduled with fabulous folks like Representative Gomez. So you can sign up for one of those, or you can call us and we'll do one for you on Zoom. We're happy to do it. A couple more clarifications. Joey says, should tax credits that incentivize certain investments in taxpayer behaviors be repealed, like clean energy tax incentives, historic rehabilitation tax incentives? We don't really get into that, Joey, for us organizationally. We don't deal with those pieces of this. We're really looking at equalizing ordinary income and capital gains, raising the marginal tax rates, increasing the number of tax brackets, implementing a wealth tax, and dealing, I mean, we'd actually, Representative Gomez, we'd rather switch it to an inheritance tax, because part of the problem is that it's structured as an estate tax, which for administration is easier, but for people understanding it, people have, you can't call it a death tax if it's your lazy kid who's never done anything inheriting all your money. Sorry. And then I think, so we just have one more minute left. So I'm just going to remind everybody again, taxtherich.com. Go to that. We'd love to get you involved. And then, Congressman, any closing thoughts from anybody, and Chuck, Stephen, or Morris?
I just want to say thank you for having me. I have to run, but
Thank
when
you.
it comes to those questions regarding the tax incentives, it's something that I believe that same thing. You have to make sure that the tax credits and the rebates are set up in a way that the folks who are working class can actually take advantage of them, not just people who already have the income to take advantage of them. Same thing about how do you create fairness in the system between folks at the top and folks at the bottom. So you guys don't focus in on that, but I have to focus in on all of it. So thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thanks for your leadership.
Thank you.
Representative Gomez, I've never heard anybody except for me say that taxes are sexy.
Thank you.
We're glad you're on the House Ways and Means Committee.
Thank you. Y'all have a great day. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Representative.